Welcome back. We are now on chapter 4 of the E-Myth, written by Michael Gerber. This one's for the HVAC contractor, so it's co-written by Ken Goodrich. Again, I'm not an HVAC. We are an exterior cleaning, run about $1 million a year company, and I have a lot to learn. So this is one way I get to do that. So we're going to learn together. So this chapter is on Eyes on the Money. Chapter 4, what was really interesting, one of the takeaways I got from this one is we are not Walmart. We don't make our money over volume. We make it over quality. So one of the things he talked about, key in cash flow is, and Eyes on the Money is, understanding that we base our company off of quality, not quantity. And one of the worst strategies for pricing is by looking at our competitors or asking someone who sells us parts or as a vendor, what should I charge for this? That's the absolute worst way for pricing. I thought that was the best way to understand pricing. So we're going to learn a lot on this here. Okay. So to get started here in this first chapter, he talks about, Ken, if you didn't check out last video, you really need to, the last couple of videos. So Ken Goodrich wasn't always running a $100 million a year company in HVAC. He had a lot of struggles. One of the things was his IRS asset seizure. People came with guns and badges to haul off his stuff. Ooh, I can't imagine that was like. So after that, he wanted to read a book by Tom Mahagan, I could be saying it wrong, the founder of Domino's Pizza, which I love pizza, by the way. Interesting thought. He named it Domino's Pizza because other businesses failed, like Domino's collapsing, so he named it that way. Isn't that crazy? But his takeaway from that book was, Tom said you should always have 3 times, if you can see that, 3 times the amount of accountants you need more than you think. 3 times more than you think. Wow. So one of my first things I put on here is, so if you have a thought that comes to mind, jot that down right away. Not necessarily what I'm saying or the book says, but what comes to mind when you hear that. So my first thought was, I need to schedule time with my CFO and also my CPA. Now, how do I have a CFO in a small company? Because we hired a bookkeeping company, and one of the features they have is they help you as a CFO. Yes. We also have another person who sends in our invoices and works on our accounts receivable, and then also have an accountant. So I guess I have 3. And this brought me enough thinking, I better make sure that I'm using them to my fullest advantage. Am I doing it right? So now let's get back on this one here. So one thing he talked about in this cash flow. Now, cash flow, we mentioned earlier, this is how cash flows in your business. Okay. So it's not only just the profit we bring in from doing the job, but how the cash flows from paying our technicians, paying our overhead costs, and kind of balances around your business like a ping pong ball, as Michael Gerber put it. So one of the key things he said in his cash flow was never bill a homeowner a charge in the same day. Am I saying that right? Never bill homeowners, collect by either a check, credit card, or offering a financing option. That's a huge deal right there. We learned that last year. We had a major cash flow crunch, and in that we developed what we call as a sales stew. Maybe it's what I called it because I seem to compare everything to food. What this is some of our commercial customers like to bill us, like to pay us in 30 to 45 days. And it's the ridiculous thing to ask of us to ask them to pay right away or within 14 days. Okay. So I understand sometimes the bigger jobs, take longer to get paid on, but my employees, they want to get paid quickly. They don't want to wait until everything gets done. And then, so how do we balance that out? We call it a sales stew. So we balance out some of our commercial work with some of our residential work. And what we learned from my coaches a while back is to be, billing homeowners right up front. So we do what's called a deposit. I apologize if I'm saying this wrong. When we go visit a homeowner and they choose us to help solve their problems, we ask to get on the schedule a deposit. And in doing so, it's either a check, cash, or credit card, but typically a credit card, and I'll tell you why. So we bill them for the deposit of the work. And then when we complete the job and the customer is unbelievably satisfied as a raving fan, then we bill them for the last part. But we don't actually give them a bill and say, pay us when you get a chance. No, we actually, if we have the card on file, that's one of our goals is we charge that card the same day we're done. But understanding credit cards, there's extra fees involved. You make sure to keep that fee in your cost of doing the thing. As the Gerber talks about, the cost it cost you as a business owner to provide the service or whatever service that is. So doing that helped us out with our cash flow immediately. So we weren't waiting so long, because you're going to find out you have daily expenses and monthly, and this is one way to kind of track those or to help out with that. So he talked about there is the revenue generating process. This was kind of cool. Sounds simple, and it really is. The first thing is there is lead generation. This is where you buy or create sales leads. That's like Google AdWords, Facebook ads, however you're paying to get in leads, or are you literally knocking on doors, whether it be commercial or residential. You can do that. Did you know you can do that? Make sure there's not something posted in the residential area that there's no solicitors, or you could be greeted with a red and blue light saying they shouldn't be here. So that's the lead generation is the first one. The second part of this revenue generating process is lead conversion. So I got a lead, I called or messaged. I prefer actually calling the best to book that lead. So that's if you're doing estimates in person over the phone. The process here is I book the lead, I close the lead, okay? Booked it, sold it, whatever you want to call it. So I have it scheduled, and then they chose us. And the last part of this revenue generating process is client fulfillment. Get the work done and collect the money. That's something simple. He kind of shows the sales team. This is what I want you to be focused on here. This is a very simple process. Now, looking at this part, he goes, okay, next, we're going to focus on our gross profit, or it's called as a gross margin. So what is that part is? It's definitely not gross. I like it a lot. This is not to be confused with your net profit. Gross profit or gross margins is first you have your sales, okay? Then you subtract out the cost it cost you to do that, okay? This is also known as a variable cost. For us, our cost of goods sold, also called COGS, for us is the fuel it took to get to that person, the fuel in our machines to service them, the soaps we use to help clean that, the credit card fees we did for the deposit, that we took the deposit and then we use a credit card fee again to collect on it, and then also we have in there uniforms. Because our technicians tend to go through a lot of uniforms to get dirty pretty quickly. And then sometimes you might include in there if you had to rent equipment or something like that. So that's your cost of doing the thing. Also included, if I didn't mention, to pay the technician to do it. So if it's freezing cold like it was here not too long ago in like -4 degrees, we weren't sending anybody out. So those costs weren't being, what do you call, I wasn't enjoying those costs. Those costs were not incurred because I wasn't providing the service. And that's how you kind of know the cost it takes to provide the service, the cost to do the thing. And then what's left over is called your gross profit. And out of those gross profits is what we pay all our other expenses, okay? So that's how you look at gross profit or gross margin, all right? If I explain the other videos, I hope I helped make it simple here again. So he talked about as a HVAC company, their goal is a 50, 30, 20, okay? 50% gross profit, which means, let's just keep it real simple. $100 service, 50% of that, or $50, was all the cost to do the thing, okay? And then you have $50 left over to pay overhead expenses for that one small service, okay? That's pretty simple. They talk about the other 50, 30, 20 is the 30 part. The 30 part now is your overhead, okay? That could be your insurances, any leases, internet, all those other expenses, admin costs. He says to keep it at 30%. So we had $50 gone. Now we have $30 gone. We have left over $20. Right, that's the 50, 30, 20. He talks about that's the goal they shoot for in HVAC. Now, obviously, if you're in a service company that doesn't sell in parts and stuff like that, like we don't, and so our gross margin is a little bit better. But we do have actually more overhead expenses. So it still kind of balances out, but you need to know your industry. Like this, you can just, and a way you can find that out is looking at different organizations. He talked about there's a lot of resources out there of what you should be shooting for in your industry. But this is what the interesting part is, okay? So now we understand how we focus on our gross margin. He talked about then all your pricing is going to fall in line. We have this little spreadsheet that we use. I actually created a really cool system to help us do that. But once I researched all my numbers, and I'll share that some other time of how to do that, we found out that our gross margin we keep at about 36.8 is the exact number. So when I'm pricing out a job, I look at all my cost of goods sold in a really neat formula, and if my price is and after my price I put in there for what we should probably sell it for, if my COGS or cost of goods sold is below or above that, I adjust my price accordingly. Now, of course, there are some outliers in that. Typically, the bigger problem you solve, the bigger the price you're going to charge. Like if you're cleaning like a 10-story building or something like that, you might have other expenses in those things, so you'll adjust your price for that. Or if you're cleaning something that no one else can ever do, you might have a higher price and therefore a lower COGS and a higher profit margin. So it's not, there are some outliers on that, okay? But that's how you kind of get your pricing in line. This is where I talked about it earlier on, is most contractors will talk to their parts vendor or look at their competitors and saying, well, if they're charging this, then I have to charge less than that just to make sure that I get all the customers, okay? We call this is actually pricing your company as a commodity versus quality. All right, what does that mean? How about a box of nails? Okay, this is another book we used, Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits by Greg Crabtree. He talked about a box of nails is like a commodity. If we have it out here in Topeka, we've got a Home Depot or Lowe's or Menards or whatever the parts stores might have, Westlake. If Home Depot's selling it for, say, $5, we're just very general here, and then Lowe's has it for $4.50. Maybe Lowe's will be like, oh my goodness, they're selling it cheaper, I need to go down to $4.25. They don't necessarily price that way, but if you're a small business owner owning your own hardware store, you might be going, I got to lower my price, because they're all the same thing. They're just kind of nails. You see what I'm getting at? In a commodity pricing, it's a race to the bottom, which means if I keep trying to lower my prices over and over and over again, I will be eventually broke. Here's an example. What if you only make 10% profit, but then you sell your nails for 15% off? What does that mean? You actually lost money doing it. So this is why you don't want to necessarily look at just your competitors. Now you can't, maybe you can't charge 10 times more than your competitors, but there is a certain point in there understanding the quality versus quantity. But then also, this is focusing on what you need to charge to stay in business. That's the biggest part. And if sometimes you can't charge what it takes to stay in business, you may have to either do a couple of things. You may have to adjust your pricing, or it's realistically, you may have to adjust your cost in doing so. Maybe you can't operate your business at a Trump Tower when you're first starting out. A little bit too much overhead. So focus on the gross profit. I'll help you with pricing, stay in line. And then talks about focus on quality over quantity. If Walmart can do it real cheap and they're a big company, then I have to do it real cheap. In my industry in pressure washing, let's use an example of house washing. I wash the outside of a house to make it look fresh and new. A homeowner isn't going to call me next week to do it again. And isn't going to call me next month. A lot of times they don't even call me next year. They might call me in 2 or 3 years. You know how long it's got to keep in contact with a customer? So if I sold it on a cheap price, hoping that I only get a whole bunch of them, I have to now find a whole other customer, make a friend, and then provide the service and do it very, very quickly and over and over and over again to churn it to make any kind of profit if I'm doing it on the cheapest scale. By then, they call us back in 3 years. You may or may not be in business. So that's understanding quality pricing versus a quantity. He talks about the leader in every major market, this is really cool, is premium priced and premium service provider. That doesn't mean the contractor says, what's everybody charging? I'm going to go way above that. It's not necessarily the pricing strategy he's talking about. He's saying the contractor who's the most competent, okay, that's for getting expertly trained, so you can say you are, obviously, and takes care of his customers the best, owns the market. Not the cheap guy. Oh. If you're in this business to make a difference for your family or for your kids' kids eventually, and you want to stay in business, and if you want to be like that company that you kind of model yourself after, the one that has all the nicer trucks, that has the marketing you understand, that has the name brand credibility you recognize and see in places, if you want to be like one of those kind of companies, then you'll be able to stay in business to do that. Being the cheapest guy may be kind of fun if you're saying what we would call a beer league or pizza league for the more PG version. I just want to make a little extra money on the side and I can help some of my neighborhood. Great. If that's a league you're wanting to stay in, well, now you understand what you're going to get. If you're saying, I want to make a bigger difference for my family, like when church wants a fundraiser done, or my school wants a my kid's school wants a fundraiser done, I can just help with that. Why? Because I charge quality pricing because I provide quality services. This goes into the next part of the value of the business is equity. Okay. Equity, as we mentioned in the previous video, was what is your business worth? What is my business worth? What do you mean? I started my company because my previous employer let me go. Whew. If you've gone through that, I'm sorry. That's a tough lesson, especially hard when you're a dad and a husband and you've got bills. Really kicks you right in an area you don't want to be kicked in. But it is maybe part of your story and it was part of mine. And so I said, I don't want it to happen again. I don't climb a company ladder on the wrong kind of wall. I'm going to do it for my family. And in doing so, I need to learn a few things because I wasn't a business owner then and as growing one right now, I know that eating a book actually helps us out. So equity, what is my business worth? Okay, this is the interesting part. The more predictable gross margins we have, controlled overhead costs, and predictable profitability create the most viable businesses. Why does somebody buy a McDonald's? It's not because they have a fascination with cheeseburgers and they think McDonald's is the best burger out there. We talked about earlier, if you make a Big Mac, the way I say it makes a Big Mac with a Big Mac sauce, you have Big Mac money. So if you want a business that's going to be worth something one day, and I'll tell you why, then you have to follow these kind of three things. Just think, if you had $500,000 and you wanted your money to make money, you're going to be able to, you want to buy a company that's going to give you predictable returns, right? Which is going to have predictable gross margins. Okay, that's the money I have left over after cost of goods sold. Controlled overhead costs, which means we can predict what the overhead is going to be because that gives you predictable profitability to create the most value. Now, here's a fun question. I've thought about this many times. I didn't start the company to sell it one day. I started because I needed some income. And the cool thing is, as we've grown the business, I've been able to provide income for myself and then also our team. We've got about 12 people right now on staff right now. So we're growing at the biggest company, like I said earlier. And please don't say that I'm the expert on this, okay? I'm just sharing these things with you because it helps me grow too. But what I found out is they all like to earn money. And now, not everybody comes to work and stays working for us because of the money, but it is a big part. So he does talk about, count your money, understand these costs, be respectful of it. It's not the only thing to focus on because then you could actually slow your business down if you're too afraid to do anything because you only focus on profit dollars. But this chapter is talking about how cash flow helps you. And this is the crazy part. To sell your business or not to sell. Just a real quick note on here. He mentioned something that kind of punched me in the gut. Let me tell you what it was. And by the way, I have to get a whole new highlighter because I highlight things over and over again so I can relearn it. This isn't the first time I've read the book, so I have to use a different highlighter. This is what he talked about. Many people tell me they're never going to sell their business, but ultimately everyone will sell their business at some point. They're going to sell it to the bankruptcy court, a creditor, a family member, a strategic buyer, or even a competitor. That's because we don't live forever, and we certainly don't want to work forever. Oh, so would you rather be able to sell your business one day or have to close it? Or worse yet, if you did things a scary way by not learning, it's more scary to not learn than it is scary to go act. And you leverage things like your personal house or personal property to get a loan for your company. Sometimes we do that at the very beginning, but that's not the long-term thing. Because right now, if your business is starting out, you don't have much credit, and it's your own personal. But you can go too far with that. You can be getting different loans to pay off things because we haven't learned. We're paying off expensive lessons, okay? What he's talking about here is, would you rather just close your business and not be worth anything and you have all that personal debt and struggle? Or would you rather one day be able to sell it? This is a really cool part. He talked about what an HVAC company can bring. As a simple rule of thumb in a small service-based business, it may be 2 times net profit. So at the end of the year, if you created a $20,000 net profit, then times 2, your business might be worth $40,000 minus all the debt you have. Doesn't sound like a lot, but he talked about sometimes you can get 7 to 10 times multiples of your net profit if you're following his principle of the 50, 30, 20. Now, in pressure washing, I don't know if it's to be that true, but I do know we had another offer on our company. It's not for sale, by the way, but it was enough to say, maybe we should talk. So I understand that. I don't want to ever have to close my company. It's worth a lot to me, taking care of my family, and I'm sure yours is worth a lot to you, taking care of your family too. But the versus the other side is to close it. How can we make it more profitable for if we want to pass it on to my son one day or my daughter? or if we ever want to sell it, or if we ever want to buy other companies, we're going to need to be able to make sure we're worth something as a business, because you are worth something as a person. So I'm excited. I know money wasn't your only focus, and don't let it stay that way, but we do need to have a healthy respect for it. So tune in for the next chapter. We're going to be covering, this was a back-to-back, remember Michael Gerber wrote a chapter, then Kid Goodrich wrote a chapter. So the next one is on the subject of planning. If you haven't got this book, I hope they have a link down in the description to get it. I definitely recommend reading it. I'm having so much fun. I'll see you the next time.